Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. This is your host, Young Brando, and we're live from Los Angeles. I'm coming back at you with some watch talk. We are going to talk about some new releases, kind of do a dissection and digestion of watch media as well while we're at it. And maybe towards the end, we will take a look at a few pieces that are coming up on auction. So let's get right into it. You guys know I warm up my vocal cords, so to speak, with some Instagram content and kind of go through some of the stuff that I've been posting over the last day. Since these lives have been more regular, I'm just going to talk about the two pieces that I posted today. This is the Prince of Rome, or the eighth King of Rome, Francesco Totti, one club man, famously played for Roma his entire professional career. Here he is getting out of Roma's Trigoria training facilities after a hard day's work in 2004. And he is in his Ferrari 612 Scaglietti, and on his right wrist, he is wearing Rolex Cosmograph Daytona. That's the reference 16520, the famous Zenith Daytona, as it's also called, since as the first generation of self-winding Rolex chronographs, it is based on a caliber that was sourced from Zenith, namely El Primero 400, which, of course, Rolex heavily modified, eliminating the date, reducing the frequency, improving some of the shock resistance, so on and so forth. Many little details there. And this also gave us the kind of classic panda dial layout that has been, I think, incredibly influential in giving the model a makeover in 2023, which gave us ultimately 126 500 LN. He has famously said, Totti, I've cheated on all my girlfriends, but I've never cheated on Rome. And as it happens, he has stayed pretty loyal to the Rolex Daytona as well, because as I've previously documented, the 48-year-old has more recently worn this particular racing dial Daytona in white gold, with those radially arrayed Arabic numerals, kind of like a slate gray dial, which, depending on the light and the angle with which it catches it, can look anything from almost black to an anthracite gray to a much lighter shade of gray. As you can see, Francesco Totti is elated to have the opportunity to sign autographs in this particular moment when he's wearing the 116509. Here he is much younger, some 2 decades ago, wearing the classic Panda dial Daytona in stainless steel. He has, of course, won the World Cup in 2006 in a dramatic final showdown against Zidane's France. Where he famously headbutted Marco Materazzi and received a red card for it. I'm talking about Zidane, of course. Totti also won as the captain a Scudetto with Roma in 2001. with a famous squad that also included the Argentine striker Gabriel Batistuta, among others. He has also won 2 Coppa Italia back-to-back in, I think, 2006 and 7, and then, no, 2007 and 8. And he remains to this day the most capped player in Roma's history and their top goal scorer. And with 250 league goals, he's also the second highest scorer of all time in the history of the Italian league. That, of course, goes by Serie A today. I actually couldn't decide whether I should have posted a picture of the car as well. I think I will from now on. You know, I told you before, I try to focus everything in a single frame. That's part of the challenge, but I can always add stuff after the swipe, and people on Instagram have been telling me maybe I should do that, especially on the broadcast channel, where I give some behind the scenes looks and get some advice from the brain trust there. So next time I'll make sure to share those kinds of photographs. And in this case, I actually found a picture from the same day where Totti is stepping into that car. I'm having a hard time retrieving it now. No, it's right here. Let me. Hi, Ozzy. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate you. There we go. That is Totti. You can recognize him from his white wife beater, stepping into his Ferrari. Did I say 912? It's 612. Obviously, I mean, I know preciously little about cars, if anything at all. So please do forgive me for that. But that was the legendary Roma player Francesco Totti and his Daytona. I've also had the pleasure to watch this episode of a new series called Off Day, where they basically follow famous athletes on their off days, voila, when they eat and shop through a given city. And you guys know I've been obsessed with Arena Sabalenka for the last few months. I mean, it's been almost a year now, but anyway, I have had a long break from live streaming, as you guys know, so you may not have experienced it firsthand. So I was really happy that they gave her an episode, and she was, of course, wearing Audemars Piguet. Actually also made us stop at Material Good 2. I'm not gonna spoil the surprises there. Even if they're not watch related, it might be interesting to follow. I think the video is available if you just search it on YouTube at some point, hopefully not now. Stay tuned here. Arena Sabalenka Off Day, and you'll be able to watch the whole episode. I think it's a great concept, honestly, because it allows all these different brands and platforms to basically plug themselves. The Chase Travel, the Sapphire card Infatuation, which is kind of this restaurant review website that has different branches for practically every single metropolitan area in the US, is behind it. A couple of different production companies are behind it, and they get to also talk about their favorite restaurants and favorite places to shop. And here she's eating a smash burger and wearing an absolutely smashing killer AP Royal Oak tourbillon, a flying tourbillon at that. This is one of those references that were released on the 50th anniversary in 2022. It is an offshoot of the RD number 3. RD number 3 was the extra thin, self-winding flying tourbillon that was for the first time presented in the ultra-thin 39 millimeter case of the Royal Oak Jumbo, 8.1 millimeters thick altogether, just like the Jumbo, 39 millimeters in diameter, just like the Jumbo. This model that she's wearing actually came out a few months after the first release, and it was, in fact, even more compact. That is the reference 26660 in stainless steel, case, bracelet, and all, and driven by the same exact caliber 2968. By the way, I also did my deep research thing and found also a personal wrist shot video from Arina Sabalenka's sources too. So that is the same watch on her wrist with a plum purple Petite Tapisserie dial. It's really a beautiful piece, and I think it really honors the kind of legacy Audemars Piguet has in this field, because even though they might no longer hold the world record, the world's flattest automatic tourbillon, after all, is now Bulgari's Octofinissimo tourbillon automatic since 2018, if I'm not mistaken. But AP held that record for more than 3 decades with their classic tourbillon automatique reference 25643 that I've previously featured on my feed on Instagram. I'm sure you will recognize it. If you don't, do a quick kind of run through on my feed, and you'll probably find the watch. It's kind of like an Egyptomania fueled design, ultra thin, quite compact, which has a tourbillon cage in titanium as well, just like this one. This particular piece, thanks to the geometry, the svelte architecture, and peripherally driven mechanism of that tourbillon cage that you can see at 6 o'clock, has the ultimate ultra-thin dimensions that fit into the classic Jumbo case. Of course, in this case, the diameter is smaller too, 37 millimeter and 8.1 millimeters in thickness. And the tourbillon cage sits absolutely flush at the same level with dial 2. So that was pretty cool as well. Just to share with you really quickly, Francesco Totti and Arina Sabalenka, whom my friend Cloud Ken recognizes as a great player. Or maybe that was Totti. Hi, Ryan Hoffrey. I think, did I screw up my presentation on this? I may have. It's okay. It's been a long day for me, but anyway, I'm here now. It's all good. Here is the piece on her wrist in video format. And here is Sabalenka eating a smash burger in Hamburger America in this third episode of Off Day, which, as I mentioned before, follows famous athletes on their off days as they kind of eat and shop and do their favorite activities in their favorite cities. I really like this particular dial, actually. Didn't want to make a huge deal about it because sometimes people think that this version of the RD3 is just a different colorway, but it's really a different watch, right? You know, it was already a feat for AP to come up with the earlier 50th anniversary model, to have a piece, to have a flying tourbillon, self-winding tourbillon fit in the classic case of the Jumbo, 39 millimeters, 8.1 millimeter in thickness. This is 37 millimeters, so even more compact. Looks great on her wrist. Complements that lilac-hued Nike sweater. And the 26-660, as I mentioned, does a great job in continuing that legacy of flatter and flattest automatic tourbillons that AP has been producing for quite a few decades now. CloudCan says AP doesn't have a lot of tennis ambassadors. They don't. You're absolutely right. But I think they made a very nice and strategic entry with Sabalenka because, first of all, she has the potential to become a very dominant player in women's tennis, for sure. She has already won a few Grand Slams, and on her best day, looks almost unbeatable. So if she can get the right consistency, I think you have something very special in your hands as a brand. Also off the pitch, I think she kind of straddles both ends of a woman athlete's presence and charisma. Like she can be very glamorous and interesting, quite captivating when she is glammed up. She can also be very, very athletic, dynamic, and is again a very strong presence whenever she does the athletic / athleisure thing, as she does in most of this episode. They had Serena Williams before, so they couldn't have matched that, right? They were essentially facing the same problem that Rolex is facing in tennis, right? Rolex is also investing in the right people, don't take me wrong. I mean, between Carlos Alcaraz and Yannick Sinner in men's tennis, they have probably the whole market cornered, not to mention Iga Swiatek and others in women's tennis as well, Coco Gauff, so on and so forth. But again, it's hard to replace these kinds of singular figures, and I think AP has done their best, basically, with recruiting Sabalenka. All right. Hello, everybody. By the way, I see the numbers are fluctuating, jumping, so please hit the like button as you come in. We're talking watches. There are not many channels, there are not many outlets that do that in a free-flowing live stream mode where that is the main objective. We don't have any other um, side shows, clown shows, side quests. We're here to talk watches, to disseminate the passion and knowledge on wristwatches. And we are going to talk right now a little bit about a new release that I'm quite excited about. You guys know that I am kind of jealous of collectors who are perhaps new into the hobby or even just discovering it. Because in our time, um, at the entry level, at the budget level, you might say, all we had was basically when we wanted to look into mechanical watches was Seiko and Citizen, more or less, right? So in fact, pardon me, I was never a big fan of Citizen watches. So for me, it was mostly Seiko when I wanted to get a beater, have some um, idea for getting something that was still fun, but in a way that wouldn't require much of a budget, something throwaway. These days, collectors have all manner of different brands from various different regions and countries all over the globe with their unique aesthetic, even as they mostly operate on very classic categories. And the Milano-based Unimatic is, I think, one of the more distinctive brands in the sense that they have a very defined aesthetic, right? Most of their watches either look like divers or field watches. They also have some chronographs, but they're almost immediately recognizable as a Unimatic piece. The visually, uh, even though again, their diver, which we are looking at now in the new Pro Diver collection, looks every bit of a diver watch. It also looks very different from most of anything else on the market. They have basically renewed their diver collection. Um, it's the Pro Diver collection now uh, as their flagship collection. And they, in fact, have even kind of a high performance version, which is the piece you see in the middle, that has a 600-meter depth rating. All of the pieces have fully graduated dive timing bezels, great luminous signature, as you can see, presented on nylon NATO style straps. The classic U1, both of which are edition of 300, run on the Seiko caliber NH35A. These are the ones that have a stainless steel case, either an orange or black dial, and have 300 meters of depth rating, which is basically the signature of their Modello Uno. Of course, again, an orange dial is almost a cliche for a dive watch. Nevertheless, it looks quite fresh here, and I like the fact that, again, their design is quite recognizable. I like the 300 versions because it doesn't have a date, right? So the dial aesthetic is quite balanced and uninterrupted. Each version comes in this presentation box, which matches that utilitarian aesthetic, obviously. Super luminova luminous material and a ceramic bezel insert for the rotational dive timer. Hey, Tim G. Nice to see you, man. And thanks for reminding people to upvote. Tim G says AP Royal Oak and or Patek Sports. That is it. Well, I mean, that's a life anyone would love to lead. Cloud Ken greets Tim G. I love it where people know each other and people can greet each other and already have a sense of community in the chat that always drives me on, that always excites me. My Wi-Fi connection is kind of unstable, so if the broadcast is a little choppy or if we experience any problems, I do apologize, but please also do let me know in the chat, and I will try to see if there's anything I can do. So these Japanese / Seiko powered NH35A caliber versions, both 300 pieces in black, 300 pieces in orange. These versions of the Modello Uno are 750 euro per piece. And then you have basically the Pro version, which is also larger case diameter. The classic Modello Uno, the one that has the 300-meter water resistance, had the stainless steel case. That was, I think, also a little bit thinner as well. Whereas the bigger Pro Diver is no, actually. That's interesting. I guess it's simply a better made watch. So the 300-meter depth rating version of this watch, which runs on a Seiko NH65A movement, is 41.5 millimeters in diameter, 13.2 millimeters in thickness, whereas this Pro Diver 600 meters that runs on a Sellita SW200 is a thinner watch. It's likewise 41.5 millimeters in diameter, but only 12.3 millimeters in thickness. Grade 2 titanium case with a sandblasted finish. Better movement, stronger water resistance, higher depth rating. And a very similar aesthetic otherwise, except of course, this particular piece has a date window at 6. And it is twice as much as the earlier editions that we were looking at, 1,500, 1,500 euro altogether. I really like the luminous signature of these pieces. As you can see here, looks quite beautiful with that sandblasted titanium aesthetic. Thank you, Ken. Thank you. Appreciate it. Let me know what you think of these pieces, whether you have owned a Unimatic before. I had a chance to examine these, having seen them on the wrists of other collectors. I have not, however, owned one, so it's hard to give you a full review with weeks and weeks on the wrist. But the price point seems interesting enough, especially at the entry level. You know, as I mentioned, 750 euro, which I think comes up to $870, whereas the titanium Pro Diver with the 600-meter depth rating and the Swiss movement, the Sellita SW200, comes up to 1,750, more or less, 1,750. All three models, pardon me, the orange dial and black dial of the Seiko movement version, 300 meters depth rating, as well as the titanium piece, grade 2 titanium sandblasted finish with 600-meter depth rating, and the Sellita movement. All of these three editions are made in 300 units each. We also have a very humble goal, guys, of 5 super chats of $5 or more. If we reach that goal, I will actually go until midnight. Otherwise, I will probably close right around 11 o'clock. So there's still some time to go. But just to put it out there, if you want to support the channel, that's a great way to do it. If not, simply sharing the link, contributing here in the chat, asking questions, making suggestions, generating conversation. It's always quite cool and helpful. The next new release that I want to discuss, again, from those micro brands, Maen, I think is the way you pronounce the name of this brand, right? The reason I bring it up is twofold, because I really like what Ariel Adams does in A Block to Watch, don't take me wrong, but something that he says here, I think needs a little more dissection, and especially because we were just looking at, you know, an auction where we saw the origin of this design. funny enough, in this review of the new Manhattan Collection 37 Ultra Thin, Ariel Adams says something like, how this piece is an original design. Let me find exactly where that line is. I will just give you the visual here of the new segment. And one of the nice things they do, at least, is how they differ from one model to another, right? You know, there's the 39 millimeter, which I believe sorry, the 37 millimeter was the original, and then they came up with the Manhattan 40, which was the self-winding, and then they added the Manhattan 39 ultra thin, which has the hand wound movement, and then also added the 37 ultra thin. Of course, all these numbers refer to diameters, and the ultra thin versions actually are manually wound. Both feature a Swiss-made ETA Peso 7001 caliber. Now, what Ariel Adams says here is the core design is both nicely done and original compared to the competition out on the market. And he is referring to this ever expanding and infinitely broad and saturated category of the integrated bracelet watch. Now, we all know that this design is nothing original, right? You know, in fact, it is one of the most unoriginal designs in the market. The only reason one would call this original is if they think that the Royal Oak and the Nautilus are the only two examples, and this doesn't exactly look like either one of them. Whereas if you look at this piece, which is the Vacheron Constantin Royal Chronometer, again, a 70s design with an integrated bracelet execution, this is the main watch that we were just looking at, right? You know, this is the quote-unquote inspiration, which they have practically gone ahead and copied one on one. Now, that being said, I think the value proposition is there. The piece is interesting. I like the approach they have in offering ultra thin versions. I've talked about this a number of times. Part of the appeal of the integrated bracelet design, the 70s concept that Gerald Janta propagated on that level with the Royal Oak in 1972 and later with the Nautilus in 1976, is essentially not only a luxury sports watch with a design that integrates the bracelet into the case, it is also a chic design, so to speak, something sleek and elegant and svelte that sits close to the wrist, much like the ultra-thin dress watches that Audemars Piguet was known for at the time, for example, right? So for me, any contemporary interpretation of this concept that isn't a watch that's at least thinner than 10 millimeters kind of misses the point. Of course, it's kind of cool. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Chalk flew up, who's also a member of the channel, $5, and Brody, $4.99. Good evening to you both. Love you both, and thank you so much for your support. We are only 3 super chats away from the goal, so we might as well get it done and actually carry this live stream up until midnight. Now, coming back to the point, I think, when you have a watch that's thicker than 10 millimeters or more, as an entry into this very saturated integrated bracelet sports watch market, you're kind of missing the point, right? Because the original design is really oriented around that wrist feel of having something ultra thin and svelte. And I think it's quite ingenious, actually, that Maen found the solution by going after Peso 7001, which is thin enough, which is thin because it's a hand-wound movement, and using that, basically found a way around the problem of having something big and chunky, where the design aesthetic from the 70s actually dictates having something that sits close to the wrist. So especially the 37 and 39 ultra thin models, I think, offer a lot. They bring a lot to the table. So let's go to their own website, which is maenwatches.com. This is the new 37 ultra thin. Again, I like the unique texture of the dial. I like the colors they chose. I like the fact that they went without the date, so to speak. I'm a stickler for that. I think the seconds on the subdial gives an even more considered balance to that dial. And the options are quite cool too, even though for now it's only the navy that is available, but they also have a green, a kind of salmon pink, and a slate gray coming up. Oh, pardon me. It's navy and slate gray that's already available. A green and salmon that is coming up. And the price point is basically right under 1,100 in euro, which will bring us up to somewhere, we'll be under 1,300, probably more around 1,250. And these pieces, again, do live up to that ultra thin designation, thanks to that hand-wound movement, the ETA 7001, which builds on the architecture of the classic Peso 7001. And the case thickness is 7.1, right? Down from 9.3, which their automatic watches boast, and those are driven by the Sellita SW200 movements that we were just talking about when we broached Unimatic's diver pieces. Hi, Gilden. Thank you. Nice to see you as well. And by the way, also they chose the so-called élaboré finish while giving the sapphire crystal case back to the watch. So there's something to be exhibited, even though it's obviously not the highest level of finishing. I think it's more than appropriate for the price point. Nevertheless, still something interesting to look at. Again, the architecture of the movement has some history behind it, so it's not at all something to sneeze at. And ultimately, again, even though I don't find the design as original and inspiring as some others did, I think this watch offers a lot of value precisely because it brings to the table something both affordable and genuinely ultra thin. And if the 37 is perhaps too small for you for whatever reason, I think it's actually in the integrated bracelet genre, 37 and 36 can work for a lot of people, even though it's not going to have perhaps the same kind of wrist presence as the 39 and larger case sizes, case diameters. Perhaps it's 37, 36 and 37 whisper what 39 and 41 scream, and it really depends on what you want your watch to do. But Maen also has the 39, which again is based on the caliber 7001, and it's even thinner, by the way, because it's a slightly different case design, coming at right under 7 millimeters. So it's a smidgen thinner than the 37 ultra thin, with a larger diameter, but it runs on the same movement. And it's also distinguished from its smaller diameter counterpart in the dial options that it offers. It kind of has this scalloped Côte de Genève inspired dial decoration, which is offered in green, dark blue, light blue, slate gray, and burgundy red. And the 39, again, taking a great inspiration from the classic integrated bracelet watches, the iconic duo between the Nautilus and the Royal Oak, not to mention the Vacheron 222. Since they ran on the base of JLC caliber 920, they also didn't have a seconds hand, and the Maen Manhattan 39 ultra thin also doesn't have a seconds hand, so it does have that aesthetic, and it's sold for 1,040 euro roughly, which comes to, again, right around 1,200 or a little more in US dollars. And in fact, can I? No, actually, I can't. I thought I would be able to convert it immediately, but anyway, so I think it's an interesting piece to try. Honestly, I would much rather go for something like this than the Tissot PRX, mostly because just about everyone has the Tissot PRX. And this specifically, even if it is not a better pardon me, a more original design necessarily. It is, I think, a better implementation, a better execution of that concept at the end of the day, because again, it has more compact and especially thinner dimensions as a case. I also wanted to talk about this new Seiko release, which is a Panda dial chronograph that is inspired after a Toyota car that appears in a Japanese manga about street racing. The manga is called Initial D, and the protagonist, apparently Takumi Fujiwara, who is the teenage son of a tofu shop owner and a racing prodigy, has this Toyota AE 86 Sprinter Trueno that has that Panda color scheme, right? You know, white and black, white with black accents, you might say, that you see here. And it forms part of the presentation on the inside of the box. And again, even though this is a Panda dial chronograph, since it's primarily inspired by that car, it doesn't end up being so generic, right? There's so many so-called Panda dial chronographs, which have, of course, a white backdrop with black chronograph registers, and they kind of all end up looking the same. This piece looks a little different, precisely because it has that lower third of the dial in a way that mirrors the car design in black. It also has differently sized registers, where the second subdial is rendered as the largest at 6 o'clock. Then you have a minute counter, a 60-minute totalizer at 9 o'clock. And a 24-hour counter at 3 o'clock. This watch is powered by a quartz chronograph movement, right? The caliber 8T63. And I think the 24-hour subdial is actually a 24-hour hand. It is rather tied to the larger timekeeping functions of the watch, not directly to the chronograph. And as you see, the designs of the registers are kind of akin to a dashboard of a car. I think that's kind of expected. And you can see in that 24-hour counter, you also have a flashlight icon, or rather headlight icon, I should say, that reinforces that aesthetic. The watch has a classic Seiko Hardlex crystal, 100 meters of water resistance, a thickness that scales right under 13 millimeters, 12.8. The lug-to-lug distance is 47. millimeters. The piece is a limited run of 1,995 pieces. It won't be released until January 2026 yet, but the price point seems to be right around $650. Quite an interesting piece. Again, a fun quartz chronograph if you're into the genre. That I kind of appreciate. Again, maybe I give too much of grace to Seiko, mostly because I have been brought up loving it, at least in that particular category. But this is a cool looking watch and something interesting and different to play around. While we are at it, I want to talk about another Seiko release, but this comes from the Presage series. Their affordable dress watch category, so to speak. The piece is one of those numbers that are inspired by some of the earliest pocket watches that Seiko has made. This is the Seiko Presage Classic Series Urushi SPB 499. And it has this sort of throwback aesthetic that is mostly reminiscent of classic gilt dials, but obviously the method is very, very different. Here, as you can probably already sense from the model name, you have a dial that is painted with urushi lacquer, which of course speaks to the artisanal Japanese tradition as well. The particular effect is achieved after the application of multiple layers of lacquer and polishing, and you have this high level of shine, but also significant depth that seems above and beyond the price point, which again for this piece is right around $1,650 in US dollars. The watch is right around 40 millimeters in diameter, right around 12 millimeters in thickness, and has a 48 millimeter lug-to-lug length. So even though it has perhaps a throwback aesthetic, the dimensions are more akin, closer to a modern dress watch more than anything. Obviously, the watch is rendered in stainless steel. It's utilitarian enough with a depth rating of 100 meters, so you can you don't have to worry about it, let's put it like that, when you're washing your hands or washing the dishes or cooking with it if you want to. The 20-meter lug width should allow you to play around with a number of different straps. I think the movement is quite decent for the price point as well. It's the caliber 6R5H. Might not be the most chronometrically precise and accurate movement, but again, for a workhorse self-winding movement, it has the 72-hour power reserve, which is quite decent. And that is achieved with the lower beat frequency of 3 hertz, just to put that out there, which is a trick that companies use. Powermatic 80 is basically a movement that is modified along the same lines by reducing its beat frequency so that it would have that famous 80-hour power reserve. Right, that movement is also reduced from 4 hertz to 3 hertz, from 28,800 beats per minute, so beats per hour, semi-oscillations per hour, to 21,600 semi-oscillations per hour. The watch also has a 24-hour indicator at 6 o'clock and sweep center seconds. So if you, at first glance, thought that oversized subdial at 6 o'clock was for the seconds and the centrally deployed third hand for something else, you may have confused it, but it's actually a 3-hander with an additional 24-hour indicator at 6 o'clock, which can come in handy in certain situations. That is, once again, the Seiko Presage Classic Urushi SPB 499. Very nice modern dress watch with a throwback aesthetic that is reinforced by its Urushi lacquered dial. And that dial has a certain depth, I think, that you might not be able to find necessarily at the price point. Of course, the pictures don't really do much justice to it. There we are. I especially like how the elongated Roman numerals look. I also like the font that Seiko has chosen for the 24-hour subdial as well, which obviously has Arabic numerals. Joker's Wild asks, what's the source of information to learn about watch design and engineering? It depends on, I would want to ask to what end, right? And without you having to answer that question, I'll give you 2 suggestions. If you look at it more as a thought exercise, intellectual enhancement, whatever you can find online in terms of corners like Caliber Corner, what's the other one that's also quite famous? Watch Base, Caliber Corner. These kinds of websites, I think, are really great. Grail Watch Reference, again. A lot of these websites, again, I'm repeating, Grail Watch Reference, Watch Base, Caliber Corner. You have the ability with these where you can search for a specific movement with its number, and these databases will give you a visual of that movement, a quick spec list, sometimes even diagrams. Sometimes, depending on the website, they will break it down to parts and give you even a kind of history of it, certainly inform you about what watches that this movement has been used in. Again, if you didn't exactly know, or if you were simply wondering about, well, I know that JLC 920 is used as caliber 2021 for the Royal Oak Jumbo. Where else has it been used, right? And you can kind of open and take a look at all the other options, right? For example, this is it. Right? This is Grail watch reference, AP 2121. You have a kind of the more elaborate version of it that was the beating heart of the 15202 before the 40th anniversary edition, right? The open worked rotor with the Gothic font is the giveaway there. It has some general information. Where does it come from? JLC 920 family. What's the thickness of the movement? How many joules? Power reserve, beat rate, diameter, so on and so forth. What technical characteristics, blah, blah, blah. What watches has it been used? You can also click to JLC 920 family. That will give you, again, AP21, AP2121. For Patek, you can go in. I'm not sure why it's not listing it there. I guess it doesn't really have any detailed information about the Patek derivatives of the JLC 920 that were, for example, used in the reference 3700, the original Nautilus. Anyway, so that's one that's one road, that's one pathway, right? Where you can think of some historical pieces, hunt down what kind of watch, what kind of movements powered that watch, break it down to its elements. So Grail watch reference, watch base, and caliber corner would be great for that. I was going to say, if you were coming from a watchmaking perspective, or if you were interested from a watchmaking pathway into understanding movements and their engineering, you can't go wrong with George Daniels's classic book, Watchmaking, right? Obviously, it is an entire method, right? It's an A to Z method of equipping yourself with all the necessary skills. And as you go through that learning process, all the necessary equipment to build a watch from scratch on your own, right? But you don't necessarily have to do that. You can also use that book as a resource to gain some insight into the different parts that make up a mechanical watch, the different kind of skills and approaches that go into building a watch from scratch. And when you don't have the practice of, short of having the actual practice of breaking down a mechanism to its parts, the best way to learn about that mechanism is obviously breaking it down to its parts in your mind, right? Through a narrative, through a theoretical process of reflection. And George Daniels's book, I think, gives you one of the best pathways. Now, both of these are quite geeky ways of getting into it, but I hope it gives you some idea about how you might start that process of of thinking about the engineering and design of movements. And I think that's where you should start, right? I wouldn't recommend that you start about, um, start with books that are dedicated to a particular design, model, or brand, and approaching it from a historical perspective. I think those books and those kinds of resources are much better when you are somewhat committed to a particular brand, right? Where you realize at a certain point, okay, I like Rolex, right? I want to learn more about the history of X, Y, and Z. I want to learn more about what distinguishes Submariner as a dive watch. I'm a fan of the Reverso, right? I want to learn more about the history of its design. I'm committed to Patek Philippe. I want to read the authorized biography of this brand, right? There are all these different directions you can go at that point. If you want to decide about what watch to buy at the end of the day, I can only advise you to go out and touch and feel and examine. There's nothing that replaces that, right? You can only train your eye and work your mind so much by reading books, by learning from the computer screen, by examining pictures and even detailed photographs. Of course, things have reached another level with macro photography and everything in our age of the social media, but nothing can replace figuring things on your own, touching and feeling and experimenting and examining and training your eye in the process and opening up your mind to certain aspects of what you like about watch design. You have to go out into boutiques, into salons, into houses, into watchmakers, into secondhand watch stores, into gray market dealers, and ask as many questions as you want. Ask to see as many watches as you want. Always suspect dealers that don't want to show you watches before you prove to them that you're a serious buyer. Always suspect dealers who get exasperated by simple questions or complex questions for that matter. Always suspect gray market dealers who don't let you fool around with the watches a little bit. I'm not talking about cracking open the case back yourself. Mind you, I'm talking about just, winding the watch and hearing the movement, seeing if the bezel still works or is it stuck and grimy, those basic details. Is the bracelet quite stretchy, or does it still have some real life left into it? What remains of the original finish of the case, right? If a gray market dealer or a watch shop doesn't allow you to check out those details, never do business with them. Anyway, this has become really long-winded. I'm gonna come back to my schedule now. Tickle my talk. Thanks. Lovely to see you. What's up with you as well? We didn't reach our goal, but that's okay. I have a couple of more points to make, and I'm already quite grateful to Chalk Flew Up and Brody for their generous contributions. I think I will probably wrap it up today by talking about an interesting auction concept that's coming into the field in this fall. They're already curating the auction. They're already taking on consignments. This is a company called Marteau and Company, or Marteau et Company. The name comes, of course, from the French word for hammer, which very shrewdly they took as their symbol, precisely because it's a tool that is used both in the auction circuit and also in watchmaking, specifically in independent watchmaking, which they claim is their métier, basically, because the concept of Marteau is led by two familiar faces from the world of watches, the world of auctions as well. And those two people are Léonard Pictet and Arthur Touchot, who have worked for quite some time within the Richemont Group, which is where they met, I believe. Arthur Touchot also worked for Hodinkee for a little bit. More recently, he has been with the Philips auction house, I think since 2017. I don't know if he still continues with Philips in any capacity, but this initiative is independent from that. Arthur Touchot also wrote a book on De Béthune called The Art of Watchmaking, and released it in 2002 with Assouline. I think the book is now sold out. But the idea basically is to bring into the world of watches and watch auctions a kind of artistically oriented auction model, right? Where independent watchmakers of our day are basically treated and represented as artists, and they have basically a kind of maker's fee, right, which is quite common in the art circuit for the artists to receive a fair share from secondary sales of their works. So in this case, for example, where an independent watchmaker, let's say MBNF or Josh Shapiro, sells a watch to a client, that client ends up going onto the secondary market or putting the watch up for an auction with Sotheby's, Phillips, or Christie's, or Bonhams. Once that watch is sold, obviously the consignor benefits, the auction house benefits, but the watchmaker, beyond perhaps the ignominy and the quote-unquote prestige of a watch selling at a record price, does not see any benefit from it. They don't, in fact, get anything immediate in terms of financial gain from that kind of secondary sale, no matter how important that sale might be, no matter how much profit is made within the process. Marteau's model basically introduces the maker's fee into the equation for independent watchmakers, where when Marteau and Company sells a watch by an independent watchmaker, such as Kari Voutilainen, such as MBNF, such as Philippe Dufour, such as Romain Gauthier, such as Recep Recepi, that maker receives a 3% maker's fee from the hammer price. So it is a model basically that is trying to divert, that is trying to put back into the pockets of independent watchmakers, back into the resources of independent watchmakers, some of the profits, some of the added value that is generated by their works on the secondary market. I think it's a great concept. Again, it's a concept that has been successfully implemented and used in the world of art, which doesn't find, of course, a perfect analogy in the world of independent watchmaking, right? Because we don't necessarily have this confluence, this perfect overlap between the actual maker and artist and the owner or master watchmaker or leader of an independent watch company. Nevertheless, there's at least, and again, I have to push aside the larger philosophical and aesthetic question, even whether watchmaking and independent watchmaking particularly can be considered an art. That's another can of worms, so to speak, that we can perhaps open up to a discussion on a different occasion. But I like this effort of trying to find ways of bringing at least part of the added value, at least part of the profit that is generated by the sales of independent watchmakers' products on the secondary market. Right? It's been an interesting time for independent watchmakers. A lot of them have genuinely become profitable only very recently and in this post-pandemic era. And I think the market really needs these sorts of original forms of thinking where these makers see some of the profits. Gilden says, WTF, the auction house receives 25 to 30% and the maker's fee is 3%. I don't disagree, but the comparison is nothing or 3%, right? So it's, again, they're bringing something new to the table. I wish it were 5 or 10%, in fact. But it's better than nothing. It generally is better than nothing. And this platform will be an online platform initially, but it will go beyond digital auctions, right? So I think ultimately they will hold live events, they will hold live auctions. I think it is the beginning of a larger conversation. So if for nothing else, the initiative that Marteau and company took is important in recognizing the kind of value generated by independent watchmakers in the world of horology today. I think it is the beginning of a larger conversation and initiative to divert back some of that added value generated on the secondary markets back to the watchmakers themselves. And again, we have to leave aside the larger questions of watchmaking as art and whether we have here something that exactly aligns with the artist, with the relationship between the artist and the artwork in the world of independent watchmaking. I think the analogy would be more to the kind of school off approach, right? Where you have sometimes old paintings that are associated with a certain school, right? Because the brush strokes and lighting and approaches on the canvas are, let's say, reminiscent to Leonardo, but we know that the painting is not Leonardo's, so it belongs to that school. Perhaps it's made by one of the apprentices, right? I think when it comes to the world of independent watchmaking, without having that historical fog of war, you have a similar idea, right? You know, it's when you talk about an MB&F watch, for example, it's certainly not made by Maximilian Büsser, right? It's designed by him, but the actual watchmakers, from the people who design and execute the movement to those who finish the parts of that movement, assemble it and regulate it, those who make the cases, etc. So the actual artisans who make the watch, these are all different groups, right? So once we decide on that and how much the maker's fee would be, there would be a whole other conversation about how that amount of money that goes back to the independent watchmaker should then be ethically divvied up between the actual watchmakers that constitute that brand. But again, those are all sprawling and different kinds of questions that we can hopefully broach thanks to this initiative. Again, I don't know. Like, I know of these people. I don't know them personally. They're certainly not my associates or friends. But the fact that they came up with this idea, moved forward with this idea, where there's no seller's fee, so no fees taken from the consignor, 20% buyer's premium, and the 3% maker's fee is something that Marteau will pay the independent watchmaker. And Gildan says 5% plus seems fair. Yeah, I mean, again, at this point in time, it's better than nothing, right? So I'm actually grateful that they're starting this conversation, and hopefully we'll find ways of fairly diverting back and distributing the value and the profit generated on the secondary markets back to the independent watchmakers, right? Because I think it is unfair when an independent watchmaker sells a watch for $10, $15, $20,000. It has happened before, and that watch then sells for about $50,000 on the secondary market. And yes, again, at one level, it's a great honor, right? It does bring a certain recognition and attention back to that watchmaker, back to that brand, but they don't see any immediate benefits of it. They don't get any material gains or financial benefit from it. And sometimes what seems like a little bit of financial benefit from that extra profit can make or break these kinds of lean, minimalistic, small operations, right? Because again, not everyone is at the level of profitability like Philippe Dufort, like Recep Recepi. Not everyone has the Chanel capital behind it, like F.B. Jean, like Romain Gauthier, like MBNF, right? So it might be even 3% of a large sale can guarantee operations for another batch of watches that might then raise them to a different level of profitability. So I hope this is just the beginning, and it is a very promising beginning indeed. And I think for that reason, if for nothing else, Arthur Touchot and Leonard Pictet's initiative, Marteau et Company, or Marteau and Company, is worth discussing. I think they're already curating for their first auction. So if you go to their website, you can even start the process of consigning a watch with them. And again, at least just begin a conversation or sign up for updates. And you guys know I will most certainly be covering that auction right here on this channel. So stay tuned. This is it for today. I do appreciate all of you. Thank you for joining me here. Thank you for following me here from Instagram. I'm trying to be a little more conscious in advertising my live streams through my broadcast channel on Instagram. So if you have just chanced upon it, if you have somehow stumbled onto this YouTube channel in other ways, if you're interested in watches, you'll find a lot to learn. You'll find a lot to take from this channel. So subscribe and stay tuned. I'm here basically with watch content on a daily basis. If you don't follow me on Instagram, that's also a platform that I use regularly. And in fact, I have kept the pace of posting about 2 times every day since last November. And I've seen some growth thanks to that. And that's a great place to, again, learn a little bit more about my perspective that blends lifestyle and horological content, that tries to tell stories around watches that are rich in horological detail, but also quite substantial in terms of historical detail, historical narrative, or a personal story as well. So check it out at Instagram. On Instagram, I'm at young.brando. And if you want to support the channel, of course, YouTube provides a number of different ways, which, of course, Chalk Flew Up and Brody availed themselves of tonight. Getting a membership is also a good way because it gives you access to exclusive content. So getting a membership for yourself or gifting a membership or a number of memberships is always a great way of supporting this channel and gaining access to exclusive content. And I also provide some other ways in the video description. If you prefer those, the links are right there. Otherwise, just hit the like button, stay subscribed, stay tuned, share the link to this YouTube channel at Young Brando, to my Instagram platform at young.brando. Send it to other collectors, other watch enthusiasts, and help me grow this community. We are almost 25,000 strong between Instagram and here, and hopefully that will double and triple in no time with your help. And if you can help me do that, I would be more than grateful. So hit the like button on your way out. Leave a comment right down below once the live stream ends. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, wear and enjoy your watches. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.